Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your schedule to show up in person. And to those of you who are in our streaming audience, thank you for joining us live for this special event. It's the first event that we've done of this nature. And as they say in the movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. This is our first ever State of the District. And we thank everybody for being here, either online or in person. And I look forward to giving you some information about where we are, where we've been, and where we're going in Fremont Unified. First and foremost, I want to welcome you to the Husky Theater, which is a recently completed project thanks to our community support of Measure E. We thank Principal Bob Moran and Husky Nation for allowing us to occupy this space this evening. It's a wonderful venue for this event. And I also want to thank Laura Forrest, our Public Information Officer, Louisa Mora and Bart Payne for their audio-visual technology support to pull this event together. And the question is, why this? Why now? And I was hired in Fremont Unified as the superintendent in August of 2020. And a few hours into my first day on the job, we signed our distance learning MOU. And so when you think about where we've been since August of 2020, we've come a long way in a short period of time. Our students have come a long way. Our staff has come a long way. As a community, we together have come a long way. So tonight is that chance for us to share the progress that we've made, the action steps that we've taken to address student academic needs and social emotional needs, and also to share more about the district that you may already know and some things that may be a little bit of new information. As my management team can attest, when we start any meeting, we like to bring the focus to our students. And I think that that really centers the work that we do around our intentions and our actions to be an organization of service and a place of service to our students. And I think that the next slide really helps demonstrate that mindset. And what we look at here is when the Maasai warriors of Kenya greet each other, different than we do in the Western culture, they don't say, "How are you?" They say, "How are the children?" And so that's the question I would pose for us tonight. How are the children of Fremont Unified School District? And the reason that's a norm for them in their culture, and one that I think is critically important for us, is because according to their social script, things can't be good for one individual person until things are good for everyone in the community. And that includes all children. Not some children, all children. And in Fremont, I think distinctly, our children are doing very well. Not yet all children, but that's our focus, and that's where we're going to keep working to have progress and improvement throughout the district. As we begin, we'll continue with our welcome. We'll be looking to talk tonight about our students, our staff, community partners, our schools, enrollment and finances, facility updates, and growth and development. That's a lot to cover. We'll try and get through it in a short amount of time. And certainly, there may be things that you have questions about, and you can always reach out to me online. You can find my email on the website, and I'm happy to answer questions that you may have. Starting with our Board of Education, some who are here this evening: Vivek Prasad, our Board President; Yajing Zhang, our Board Vice President; Larry Sweeney, our Board Clerk; Diane Jones, Trustee. And as you may know, coming soon, we will have a provisional appointee for Trustee Area 1. Former trustee Desiree Campbell is now council member Desiree Campbell for the city of Fremont. And tomorrow night, we're hosting a special meeting where the board will be making a provisional appointee to carry out the rest of Trustee Campbell's term. That will be the second 2 years of her current term. We have 9 applicants, and so we look forward to an energetic evening tomorrow where we get to talk to a number of qualified individuals from our community. And we thank all of them for their application to serve the students and community of Fremont. We also have our student trustee who recently at a CSBA conference absolutely demonstrated her leadership, her critical thought, and her overall excellence in representing Fremont Unified, as she does at each and every board meeting. Student trustee Sissy Zhang, who is here this evening. And I also want to compliment our SURF board as a group, because they are critical at bringing forward the student voice. When we look at districts across the state, I think we were able to demonstrate at the CSBA conference that many districts are interested in seeing how SURF board works and how SURF works because of the outcomes that they create for students. So my compliments to everybody who's involved with that important work. Our executive cabinet, I'm very proud of the team that we're building. When you look across our cabinet, we have a balance of experience from both inside the district and outside the district. For me as superintendent, I am honored to serve the community of Fremont. This is my 7th year as superintendent in the Bay Area. It's my 3rd with Fremont Unified. I bring to this work experiences from a classroom teaching perspective, a site principal perspective, various district office perspectives, even a high school baseball coaching perspective, and years as a superintendent. New to our team this year, but not new to Fremont, is our Associate Superintendent, Daniel Hillman. Danny is a FUSD alum from American High School. We're very grateful to have him return to Fremont. And unlike many people who are in charge of the business office and all of the related functions, Danny has experience as a classroom teacher, as a site administrator, and brings a real critical lens for student needs and student learning to the important work that is the operational side of our district. We're also joined on our executive cabinet team by Leticia Salinas, our Assistant Superintendent of Instruction. And Letty started the same day I did. And I'm very grateful to serve alongside Letty, who brings experience from the classroom, site administration, districts from within Alameda County and San Francisco Unified before joining Fremont Unified. And lastly, our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Zach Larson, another FUSD alumni, 2nd generation FUSD leader. And Zach also brings experience from the classroom position, principal position, district level leadership positions, and he's been instrumental in creating the environment that we'd like to see in human resources for Fremont Unified School District. I'd also like to welcome our guests that have joined us from our community partners and local elected offices. We thank you those who are joining us via the live stream as well. Now, when we start talking about our students, this is the focus of our work. And this is a more data-driven perspective about our students, but it does give you some context as to where we stand as a district. This year, we're honored to serve around 32,700 students in our pre-K through 12 programs. You'll note that we have 47 scholars that are National Merit Scholars in 2022. This year, we had 169 semifinalists eligible for 2023. Of note, the city of Fremont garnered the 2nd highest number of semifinalists among all California cities. We remain the 23rd largest district in the state of California. And as you can see, there are some statistical perspectives about our student population. In the bottom left of the screen, as you face the screen, are percentages as established by the state of California for characteristics of some of our students. And you also see our student ethnicity breakdown, with our 3 highest percentages being Asian, Hispanic, Latino, and white, and that ranges from 65% to 8.4% respectively. When we start talking about the staff that is Fremont Unified School District serving all of our wonderful students, we talk about 3 of our labor unions, our management association, and unrepresented employees. And as you can see in the graph, our staff ethnicity has different breakdowns than that which is captured from our students at the state level, because those are 2 separate mechanisms for collecting that information. You'll note in looking at the information that the diversity of our staff is not yet as rich as the diversity of our students. But we do continue to focus on increasing those levels despite a significant labor shortage across the state in the area of education. For our district, we have just over 3,700 staff members. And when you break that out, as noted on the bottom left of your screen, as a percentage, about 60% of our employees are teachers. That includes in that category our counselors, other certificated staff, and 36% are support staff, our classified staff. 4% of our staff in FUSD is management employees. And when we talk about our labor partners, I'm really proud of the fact that in the last 3 years, we've had improved labor relations for each of our bargaining units. And our board was extremely pleased, as was I, and I think everybody was, to see a significant increase in funding from the state. And with that, we were able to reach one of the highest settlements we've had in Fremont Unified in nearly 20 years for our employees. You'll note in the settlement, through negotiations, last year we were able to provide a retroactive 4 1/4 ongoing salary increase with a 3 1/4 one-time salary payment. This year we were able to provide a 6% increase in wages. And next year, you'll note that it is estimated with an asterisk at 7.13. The reason for that estimate is we have agreements with our labor groups already that we will provide the state-funded COLA minus 1%. And based on the governor's January budget proposal, that state-funded COLA is listed at 8.13%, which projects to 7.13% increase in compensation for our employees across the district, with a 3-year estimated increase of 17.38% in addition to the one-time salary payment. That does make a substantive difference for our employees, and we're very pleased to be able to do that for our employees. It also has a direct impact on our ability to recruit and retain staff. You'll note in this picture, Fremont Unified School District's Teacher of the Year, Christy Taylor, who was also recognized as the Alameda County Teacher of the Year, and one of the very few selected as one of the State Teacher of the Year finalists. And in that picture, you'll see Christy Taylor and David Thornley, principal of Cabrillo Elementary. We're very proud of the excellent work that's happening at that school and with that staff, including Christy and David's leadership. As you'll note on the slide, we do have a significant shortage of labor in education. The areas we see that the most: teachers, bus drivers, paraeducators, and in our custodial staffing. Of note today at a conference in Sacramento, I was informed that this last year, the amount of requests for emergency credentials and permits at the state level for credentialing increased by 100%. And so that starts to symbolize across the state what districts are going through to fill some of these vacant positions. In Fremont, we hired over 140 new certificated staff. And for those of you who may be unfamiliar with certificated staff as a term, that is anybody who works for the district that has to have a credential or a license from the state of California to do their job. And in this last year of our management vacancies, I'm very proud of this statistic that we were able to meet this mark. 67% of our vacancies for managers were filled by promoting FUSD employees. And as I mentioned in an earlier slide, that balance of bringing in fresh perspectives from outside the organization while honoring the work that's happening inside the organization and the historical context that is a district. And blending those two things together, I think, provides a powerful opportunity for growth. So we were very pleased to see that high level of internal promotion, as well as we've continued to try and develop that talent and pipeline to continue to promote within the district. And we're very pleased to have our Aspiring Leaders program relaunched this year. And I think at our first session, we had over 80 attendees. So that's a very good sign that we have people in the district who are looking to continue to promote into different positions of leadership. And we can't do this work with just our students and our staff. And so we thank our community partners, some of who are in the room tonight. The City of Fremont, our first responders from our SROs to Fremont Fire, the elected officials who represent our community, the Fremont Education Foundation, including also a partnership with FUSD, which recently just closed. Also, our PTA organizations across the district and Fremont Council PTA, Bay Area Community Health, Haller's Pharmacy, the Chamber of Commerce, Kiwanis, Rotary Club, Niles Rotary, Fremont Bank, Meta, Alameda County Safe Routes to School, Alameda County Library, and there's so many more partners that you can see on the screen that help us do the work that we do within Fremont Unified School District. And when you take our schools, our students, our staff, that's when you start to begin to see the full picture of Fremont Unified. And in this case, when we look at our schools across the district, you can see on the top left of the screen, 29 elementary schools, 5 middle/junior high schools, our 5 comprehensive high schools, 1 continuation school, alternate independent study school, our adult school, and our 2 early learning centers. On the bottom left, you'll see we're very proud of these programs. We have our Spanish dual immersion program, our Mandarin immersion program. At Matos, we have our elementary science magnet. At Irvington High School, our arts magnet high school. And just this month, we were informed that we had 6 elementary schools within the district that are going to be recognized as California Distinguished Schools. Forest Park, Mission Valley, Joshua Chadbourne, Wybell, Azaveda, and Warm Springs. And it's elementary schools this year. Last year was high schools, and we were very proud of Kennedy's designation as a distinguished school in the state. Also of note, Robertson, our continuation high school, has the only designation in the entire country as a model professional learning community school. And I think that speaks to the work of the leadership and the staff at Robertson and the great work that they're doing for students. When we look at student achievement, I really believe that a test is not the truest measure of a student. But in the world in which we live, in public education, standardized testing is a part of what we do. And on the screen in front of you are some performance markers for us from last year's data. And I'm going to walk through some of them with you because they may be a little counterintuitive to what you're seeing on the screen. Starting on the top left, we see chronic absenteeism as measured as high. That's not a surprise for us. We returned to school last year in the midst of a pandemic, and we had students who had to quarantine for specific amounts of time, many of which put them by a statistical category as chronically absent. And so this is a trend that we're seeing across the entire state. Our suspension rate, however, was low, which is something we want to see. We want that suspension rate to remain low. Our progress for English learners was in the middle. That shows us that we're doing some good things, and we have many more good things that we can continue to do to support our English learners. Our graduation rate remains high, around 94%. College and career readiness data was not provided this year because that's a multi-year data collection process. Also, for English language arts and mathematics, you can see that our scores were very high in both categories. There are 5 other categories where we report to the state our progress, and we have reported that we have met the standard in all of those categories. When you look at what's happening in Fremont Unified across this compared to the state, you can see that we are far out achieving the state average in most areas. For our English language arts and math, we're well above standard, and you can see the distance between Fremont Unified and the remainder of the state. For our graduation rate, we're much higher. Chronic absenteeism, even in the midst of the pandemic, we were much lower than the rest of the state. Our suspension rate is still much lower than the rest of the state, which is good. And our English learner progress is higher than the rest of the state, also good. And as I said earlier, when we look at students, test scores are a snapshot of maybe where they're performing in the moment. when we consider the work that we do serving students, this is a focus for our leadership team, this district, in building in this year for the district. We focused on building personal and authentic relationships with our students. And I think this quote signifies that work. And that is, if we are to push a child's mind, we must utilize the lever that starts at their heart. And so that is really where we take that into account. And you'll see on the slide also that the heart shape is created through a fingerprint or thumbprint. And that speaks to the unique identity of every single student that we serve. And one of the things that we've talked about is the difference between understanding and making a judgment about a student is having empathy for the student and knowing that student's unique story. And so when we think about starting at the lever, pulling at the lever that starts at their heart and knowing each child's individual story, we then will be able to serve our students much better. And as we look at how we serve our students in a safe and supportive school environment, since the return from the pandemic, we've implemented or continued many things that have been helpful for our students. A multi-tiered system of support. Very grateful to have the funding for free breakfast and lunch for all students. Our social emotional learning adoption from elementary to secondary schools. Very, very proud of the fact that our board has supported the allocation of funds to put counselors at all of our elementary schools. We now have PBIS happening across, in some capacity, all of our elementary schools. We've increased our restorative practices at our high schools. We have improved our school resource officers program, which was just recently recognized nationally for the success of the program. And we have our cost services, which is a coordination of services teams. We have our safety and emergency plans for every single school site. We have mandated reporter training that takes place for all staff at the beginning of each school year. And as you know, throughout the community, we have extracurricular events that take place both in the evening and the afternoon for students. When we talk about teaching and learning support for our students, especially in the area of unfinished learning from the pandemic, we're very pleased to have intervention specialists now at all of our elementary schools. We have allocated, since the return from our pandemic, additional sections to our master schedules at the secondary schools to support unfinished learning. We've increased the diversity of our core and supplemental novels. We've been able to adopt many new curriculums the last few years. TK through 5 science, TK through 12 social emotional learning, 6 through 8 social science. And we are looking at the expansion of transitional kindergarten eligibility through the state's mandate. We're very excited about that. And we look forward to bringing more information to our community in the very near future about shifting our kindergarten programs in Fremont Unified to full day. And we think that's going to be a very exciting development that our community and our students will respond well to as we recognize both the need and the desire. The things that drive school finance and funding are our students. And I fundamentally have a disagreement with the conceptual idea that we place a monetary value on students. Nonetheless, that is the mechanism that exists for the state of California and the federal government for how schools are funded. When you talk about school funding, in almost every single case, it's driven by the enrollment of a district, and then the actual funding received is tied to a percentage of the enrollment that has the attendance factor for that district. So we call that our average daily attendance. So as you saw on an earlier slide, we have nearly 32,700 students. We don't get funding based on 32,700 students. We get funding based on our average daily attendance rate for those 32,700 students. So if our average daily attendance rate is 97%, we're only going to receive funding for 97% of that 32,700. A little bit more about school finance here as we continue to move through our state of the district. One of the things that impacts enrollment the most is birth rates. And on the chart on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see a significant decline in birth rates that is continuing and is projected to continue. When we look at our demographic studies, we look at our birth rates and project forward the number of students who will be age eligible for transitional kindergarten and kindergarten. Obviously, with the decline in birth rates, there's a decline in the number of students eligible for our school district. And that's reflected in the graph on the right as well from the California Department of Education. There are other factors that contribute to this, including the high cost of living in California and other individual choices that people may make to move out of the state of California. And what you see in the graph is a reflection that nearly every single county in the state of California from 2018 to 2021 saw some form of decline in enrollment. So this is not a unique factor to Fremont Unified or Alameda County. When we look at our demographic reports, we try and predict where our enrollment will land. This year, with our demographers, our projection was nearly 99% accurate, but we did lose just over 760 students in our overall enrollment, and that has a significant impact on our funding, as I've mentioned. Oftentimes, when I'm talking with individuals or groups about school funding, I'm asked if we are a basic aid district. And the term basic aid is, in my opinion, a bit counterintuitive because to me it signifies that you're getting aid from the state. It's actually a little bit of the opposite. A basic aid district is a district where the local property taxes exceed the amount of money that would be provided by our LCFF, our local control funding formula. And when that happens, the additional tax revenue generated from the property taxes stays with that district and stays with that school district. And so that is why they are considered a basic aid district, because the state does not provide any local control funding formula dollars to that district, because they are exceeding that amount just with their own local property taxes. For context, in Alameda and Contra Costa County and in neighboring counties, districts that I kind of know off the top of my head that are basic aid: Acalanes Union High School District, Palo Alto Unified, Piedmont Unified, Santa Clara Unified, Fremont Union High School District, to name a few. So those are districts where within the boundaries of that district, their local property taxes exceed the state funding. Fremont Unified is a local control funding formula district, which means our property taxes locally, they provide as much of the LCFF funding level as possible. And then the state provides the remaining amount to fully fund the district at the levels as established under LCFF, the local control funding formula. So there's many factors that go into the local control funding formula, and I'm going to talk about a few of those this evening. When we look at those factors, these are projected. We start with the COLA, and this will connect with the next slide as well. We start with the COLA, which I mentioned earlier, and the governor's budget proposal is estimated to be 8.13%. And so that increases the funding that we get for each student. It's not money that we get separately just to pay for the actual cost of living adjustment that happens for our adults and our employees. All of this is tied to student funding. And then we get additional money from local control funding for the grade span adjustments, what we call GSA. We get additional funds for TK through 3rd and 9th through 12th grade. And then the state has what they refer to as the unduplicated pupil percentage. And that sets a benchmark for supplemental and concentration dollars. The unduplicated pupil percentage, as is indicated in the bottom left of the screen as you're reading it, is students in the district who are English language learners, free and reduced meal price eligible, or foster youth. The reason it's referred to as unduplicated is because if, for example, we have a student who is an English learner and also eligible for free and reduced meals, that student cannot be counted twice. That student can only be counted once. And so that's the unduplicated percentage of students. In Fremont Unified, that number is 27% of our student population. The reason that is an important factor in our funding is because this, for example, is a graph that we just received today. And you'll see in the very first line at the top of this where it says 22-23 base grant per, remember I said ADA is our average daily attendance. For each transitional kindergarten student, this is the amount of revenue the district receives. For each K through 3 student, 4 through 6 student, 7 through 8 student, and 9 through 12 student, you see the amount of revenue that's received from the state. That's the current funding in the current moment. And as I've mentioned a couple times tonight, in the second line in this chart, you'll see the projected COLA of 8.13%. That is money that then gets added to the LCFF allocation. And that's why when we describe the COLA within school funding, it is actually dollars that come to the district as an increase for all costs. There's not separate funds of money that come for cost of living adjustments for the adults that serve the students in the district and additional funding for students specifically. It generally all comes within our LCFF funding. And so you'll see in the third line, that COLA increase then creates the new projected base grant for 23-24. And as I mentioned from the prior screen, the grade span adjustment also happens. Unique for next year is projected because they're expanding the TK eligibility for transitional kindergarten. We're seeing some additional revenue just for that age level. And when you take the last year's or current year's base, the COLA, you get the new base, the grade span adjustment, and then you get your new 23-24 base grant. And remember, we talked on the last slide about unduplicated percentages. This is where it really comes into play with funding. Districts receive a 20% supplemental grant per average daily attendance for their unduplicated students. If districts are above 55% unduplicated, they receive an additional 65% of a concentration grant. So the design behind that local control funding formula is that the state allocates dollars to districts based on the demographics and characteristics of their student population, with the intention that those specific dollars are designed to serve students who may need more intensive support. What that results in is a situation where the per student funding varies greatly across our county. So on this slide, what you see is an example of where Fremont Unified ranks third from the bottom in terms of dollar amount of funding per student in the general fund. And you can see that our number is just around 12,600. And you can see the range of other districts that go all the way up to $24,380 per student. There is one notation here, which is you'll see Piedmont Unified, as I mentioned earlier, as a basic aid district. So that for Piedmont generates a significant higher level of funding per student. Our other districts, as you can see across the county, and as you may know, have a different student population and demographic than Fremont Unified does. But this is one of the challenges that exists with the positive intentions of the local control funding formula, but it creates a lot of challenges for districts across the state as well. The other aspect of funding that is something we are proud to fund and that we want to fund is our special education programs. And in Fremont Unified, I think we have great programs, including our inclusion program, but there are costs associated with these programs. And we have been advocating at the federal level with our board. Recently, we took a trip last April to Washington, D.C. to continue this advocacy, and this was one of our main talking points. When you look at the 2021 school year, Fremont Unified spent just around $71.5 million on our special education programs. Well, the federal contribution to that is about 9.9%. We'll be generous and call it 10%. You may be familiar with IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that was a promise from the federal government to fund 40% of special education costs. I've been in this business for just over 2 decades, and I've never seen it surpass 15%. And so what that means for school districts, Fremont Unified included, is that we make a contribution, and we're happy to do so because we want to support the needs of our special education students. But that contribution from our general fund ranges between $38 to $50 million annually. And you start to see that if the federal government would provide the 40% funding as promised under IDEA, Fremont Unified would have a significant immediate change in its fiscal condition. And those dollars could be used for additional programs, additional staffing, additional resources, and really could make some transformative difference for all of our students in Fremont Unified. So we're going to continue to advocate at the federal level for that 40% funding as promised. When we talk about our general fund for the district, you can see that this year our projected total revenue is just over $524 million. That is higher than normal, in part because we see significant one-time dollars this year. But in general, when you look at what we talked about earlier, which was our LCFF income or revenue, you then see our federal revenue and state revenues. Also, we do have some local revenues and lottery revenues. What is interesting to note here is when you see in the graph, the predominant amount of our funding comes from other state revenue and LCFF. And you start to see in the graphic representation how small the other funding is for the district between the federal government and the actual lottery monies that are received. When we talk about the expenditures of those funds and we take out our categorical funds for the district, of note, we are a people business. We serve our students. And because of that, as is the case for most districts, our salaries and benefits represent 86% roughly of our general fund expenditures when you take out our categorical dollars. And as it should be, that means we're spending our money serving our students with the people who do a wonderful job serving our students. I will note here that where you see benefits, this is not to be construed with health and welfare benefits. These are statutory employment benefits that the district pays, and I want to just make sure that that's clear. And you can see, as a percentage of our budget, how much of that goes to the people that serve our students, and there's really, in consideration, not much left for the other operational things that we need to do. And so when you look at the overall amount for districts, and you ask yourself, why isn't there more money for X, Y, or Z? In large part, it's because the funding really is only enough to cover the predominant amount of our staffing. When we look at our multi-year budget projection for the next 3 years in Fremont Unified, we're required to do a 3-year projection under the law. You can see that in our current year, we will have a small surplus, and our reserve is about 8.3%. What I would note as important information on this slide is over the next 2 years, we will continue to have a structural deficit of $13 to $14 million. And as I mentioned earlier, this year we're seeing a lot of one-time dollars. That is buoying up our reserves. And as noted in the bottom right of the presentation, without those one-time funds, our reserve percentages would drop substantively. So we are monitoring that as we go through this next year's budget development within the state and within our own local budget. For our local revenue, we're very grateful to our community for passing Measure I. Measure I generates for Fremont Unified around $4.5 million. And you can see on the screen the many things that Measure I helps support within the district, ranging from attracting and retaining teachers, relieving overcrowded classrooms, school libraries, student safety, and reading and writing programs, as well as math and science programs. Of note, that measure expires in 2025. So unless we are able to pass a renewal or a new parcel tax, that means that $4.5 million will have to come out of our budget projections for 2025 and beyond. We are grateful for the community's support for Measure I. And when we look at community support, we will continue to look at the next steps in our budget. Right now, we're going through that development process. I was in Sacramento with members from our business office today to hear the governor's budget proposal. And also, we'll take that, see the May revision, and have our budget adoption in June. It is a challenging aspect of school budgeting that oftentimes districts have to adopt their budget before the state adopts their budget. But we do the best we can, and that's based on the rules as established under the Ed Code. When we talk about our facilities, we are, as we mentioned in the beginning, in a facility supported by Measure E and our general obligation bond, which the Fremont Unified Community supported. We talk a lot about our tax rates. And this is an area where we're grateful to be, as a community, near the bottom of the ranking, because this graph shows our tax rate per $100,000 of assessed valuation. And you can see districts across the county and what those local districts are paying towards the school districts as a tax rate per $100,000 of assessed valuation. So while we're very grateful for our community's support, we recognize that Measure E is doing many things throughout the district, yet we have many more needs for facilities across the district in the future as well. Also want to take a moment and thank our CBOC and our FAC for the work that they do, our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and Facilities Advisory Committee for their work on both Measure E and our facilities work across the district. When we look at facility updates under Measure E, as I've mentioned, it's a $650 million bond that we passed in 2014. And there's been a number of things that have taken place: new classroom buildings, Brookville, Patterson, Azaveda, Matos, Warm Springs, Irvington, American, Washington, the theater we're in now, district-wide technology infrastructures. Also, the key point of what's happening right now is our middle school conversions. So in 2019, Walters, 2020, Horner, and then in 2021, we finally got to open the campus to our students at Horner. Hopkins Junior High School reopened for our 7th and 8th graders after construction. And in this next fall, Centerville, Hopkins, and Thornton are all on schedule to open for the fall of 2023 and fully convert to our middle school program. So we're very excited about that. We're watching closely what's happening with the construction timelines at each and every school. And I'm very happy to report that right now we are on pace to meet all of our conversion timelines there. This spring, we will host information meetings for staff, students, and families moving to Centerville, Hopkins, and Thornton as we move through those conversions. Some images that reflect the work that's happening at those schools. Walters Middle School, the picture on the right, I can tell you I was at the site last week doing a campus visit, and I took the picture on the right with my phone because the rain had stopped for the first time in what had seemed like forever. And it was just a great picture of the site, and I think it gave a great comparison to the first picture on the bottom left, where everything was brand new and you can see the growth that's happened in that space over time. Moving on to Horner, as I mentioned, we were able to open that school. And you'll see here on this slide a quote from Jay Bomani, the Horner Associated Student Body President, who spoke so highly about his experience on the Horner campus. And having been there multiple times, it is quite a facility. I'm very proud of the work that is happening in those classrooms for those students with that staff. Also with Centerville, I toured that the week before break, and that work is coming along very quickly. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen the rendering, and the top right the actual status of that building. And you can see we're making a lot of progress. It's a fascinating new building. I can't wait to see it when it's all the way done inside. The technology and the learning spaces in those classrooms is incredible. I appreciate the flexibility of the staff and the students on all of the campuses that are operating with construction. The same time they're trying to go through the process of teaching and learning. A lot of resiliency for our students and our staff, and I thank our principals and assistant principals and campus supervisors at those schools as well. For Hopkins, returning the students to Hopkins this year after a short stint at Bringhurst Elementary, which became Bringhurst Junior High for 9 months. And the Hopkins family is back in their place where they belong, and they are happy there. Construction is going well at their campus and moving along well. You can see in the pictures progress of their new gym multi-use room space, as well as the finished part of their front office. And we continue to see very good progress happening at Hopkins Middle School. Thornton is a very exciting project. The back area of the campus has already been finished and occupied by our students, and we saw those classrooms last year. Great learning spaces and design, and we're continuing to see the work on the front half of the campus this year. And this is a very exciting conversion as well. I can't wait to see the finished product. We walked the site last Friday with the principal and the construction team and the construction managers. Also, we have future facility considerations. Marshall School, as you may know, is a property that the district has gone through the process of surplusing. We're expecting to open up our request for proposals for that property from the larger community later this month. Also on the board agenda for next week is a resolution on the Patterson property as a potential surplus of property as well. And I appreciate the board's diligence and care in looking at all the resources that we can utilize to serve our students, including perhaps unused property. Also, we're updating in the current moment our long-range facilities plan, which is an incredibly important document to help us guide the future vision and projects of the district. Districts should be regularly updating and adopting long-range facility plans. If you think about the Measure E bond that was passed in 2014, how many needs have changed and evolved since 2014 to where we are today? Thus the need for a long-range facility plan. Also, we've taken some steps to improve our practices and hire some internal positions for our Measure E program performance. We have additional Measure E projects remaining. The Kennedy project was just recently approved. We have a Group 1 schools, and we're also looking at ways to continually address our high needs areas. Roofing, outdoor spaces for lunch, and as the image reflects, we have a need to address the play area, turf and track at Tack Stadium. We're very lucky to have that facility for our student athletes across the district, and that area is also in need of repair. So we have a number of needs across the district. As I mentioned earlier, when we talk about our funding levels from the state and federal government, what you didn't see was a large pot of money from either of those agencies to address our facilities. And that is why most districts have to go through the process of passing general obligation bonds. And we're grateful to the Fremont community for the $650 million Measure E bond. For growth and development within the district, I think if you just look at what we've talked about tonight, you could kind of pull out any one area and recognize that to really go into great depth, we could probably spend an hour on each topic. All of you may not survive that process, but that's the kind of detail that it involves. And so one of the things that we're looking at as a draft, this is a draft, is a framework of focus for the next 3 years. And the idea behind that is to take all of the complex things that we do in education in Fremont Unified, whether it's operational or instructional or fiscal, and create a visual representation and a centered core for that work. And so we're looking at a draft framework of focus that's centered around core values: trust, safety, equity, integrity, transparency, and communication. And as I said, this is in draft format. In the coming months, we'll be going through a process of soliciting feedback from our parent community, our community at large, our staff, and our student population. And with that, what we hope to be able to represent in the end is really some core areas of focus. The work that we do really at the sense of everything is where we started this discussion. That's our students. Teaching and learning, helping each and every child maximize their individual, social, emotional, and academic potential. That is the core of what we do. And that I refer to as teaching and learning. Where we do that teaching and learning is in the facilities that we've just described and talked about. And those facilities, from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint, need to be safe and supportive school environments, so that that critical work of teaching and learning is happening in a safe space. And we can't do either of those things if we don't properly manage the resources provided to us. And we want to be good stewards of that resource. And so that is really, in essence, the framework, is that our focus should remain on teaching and learning, having that happen in safe spaces, and being good managers of our fiscal resources to ensure we can do those two critical things. And so as you look at these drafts, we'll continue, as I said, to get feedback. They are not goals that are written in a way to say by X year or X month, we will increase by X percentage of performance metrics. It's to say over the next 3 years, what do we as a community and as a district want to say will be true about Fremont Unified School District? And so we've set forward this draft framework, and each area has some targets. You can see on the screen the targets are provided there. I won't read them all to you. This presentation will be placed on our website, and you'll have an opportunity to go back and look at those in greater detail. And as I mentioned, we'll be sharing this out with the community as well. And as we look at each aspect of that, you'll really see the intentions that we are trying to make true within Fremont Unified over the next 3 years. And with that, I would invite everybody to join us. And how you can join us is a number of different ways. Our enrollment opens January 23rd. We welcome you to join us for enrollment. And we have community committees that need representatives. And so you can take a look at this link, which is in the presentation on our website. We have a page dedicated to our committees, and you'll be able to identify where we are looking for community members, business partners, and different roles within our community to support the committee work that happens. Fremont Unified has a very robust committee process, which informs the work that staff does or directly informs the work that the board does. And the board and staff values that committee participation, both from staff, parents, and community members. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we are in a significant labor shortage, and we have a richly diverse community, and we would invite community members to turn your experiences into inspiration for our students. We have jobs that require credentials, where we'd love to see you work, and we have jobs that don't require credentials, where we'd love to see you work. And both of them support our students. I firmly believe in Fremont Unified. Whether you are the first grade classroom teacher or the AP biology teacher, the child nutrition employee who's serving a meal, the technology employee who's making the Wi-Fi successful, the maintenance technician who's fixing something that we can't operate school without, the office manager who's keeping everything at the school going, the custodian who keeps it clean, or the paraeducator who's supporting students directly. We are all educators, from the superintendent all the way through the organization. We are all educators, and I invite you to join us as an educator in Fremont Unified. With that, I want to thank you for joining us in person or online for our first ever State of the District. I hope that you learned something new about Fremont Unified tonight. I am certain that we didn't cover everything, and what I do want to leave with is one thought, and that is that we cannot be perfect in every area, but we can be perfect in our promise to continue growing. And that is what we will be in Fremont Unified. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.